And what better way to hear than from the students themselves? I'd like to start by having the panel introduce themselves. I'll begin. As I previously mentioned, my name is Leslie Gonzalez, and I am a senior at Silver Mountain High School, located in Bloomington in the county of San Bernardino. A key fact about myself is I have a very strong passion for animals, and ever since I was able to speak, I knew I wanted to aim at becoming a veterinarian.
Hello, everybody. My name is Grant Hawkins. I'm a senior at Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Riverside County. I'm from the Inland Empire, and one core fact about me is that I've been through a various amount of sports, about 7 to 8 sports during my whole year of, trying to go professional, from the age of 4 to 17. Thank you.
Thank you. And my name is Robert Carrillo. I go to Windsor High School in the town of Windsor, located in Sonoma County. And one key fact about myself, I would say, is I like to be directly involved in my community and matters regarding the environment, regarding student voices, and it's my honor and privilege to be here representing my local community. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sofia Pacheco and I'm a junior at LAUSD USC Media Arts and Engineering School, which is based in downtown Los Angeles. A little bit about me and my school experience. My school is pretty small and I've been going there since kindergarten, so it's kind of like a second home to me. I try to take advantage of leadership opportunities there whenever I can to improve my school. And I think that shaped a lot of who I am today and my current career interests. And I'm excited to be talking with you all today.
I'm Ty. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. I'm a junior at Oakland School for the Arts, which is outside of the Oakland Unified School District. And I've studied music there. I'm in my 6th year at that school. So music has been a really key part of my life for pretty much all of my educational experience, as well as, like social justice and empowering students. Yeah.
And that is great. I would like to begin this open dialogue by presenting the question, what is the main reason you decided to participate in this discussion on reimagining education? If it's okay, I'd like to start by sharing my reasoning. So I consider myself a mental health advocate. I have been clinically diagnosed with anxiety and depression disorder, and I struggled throughout my 12 years of schooling trying to maintain grades while trying to keep my mental health afloat. That being said, the reason I am here today is to express my concerns with school faculty, which either at the time made my mental health worse or were little to no help. And I find most of the teachers unapproachable and intimidating, and I have encountered fellow classmates that have felt the same way.
The main reason I'm here is because it's a great opportunity. I get to speak for other students that are not able to speak up or aren't able to get to the right people to be able to speak up. And also I would like to help newcoming students, newcomers to high school, strive earlier and figure out their life faster than as of waiting till after high school or till they finally get to college.
Yeah, and I think I'm here because throughout my time at Windsor High School and my involvement with clubs and with the administration and everything, I think I've really learned how difficult it is for student voices to be taken into account. So I really believe in the purpose of us being here today and what it means for the state of California and, the rest of the nation, really taking into account the student voice and empowering their opinions. So that's why I'm here.
For me, one of my main concerns coming into this panel was the idea that I don't think schools do enough to really prepare students to go into adulthood. Like by the time you graduate high school, you're ready to go to college, but we don't really have the skills necessary for adulthood and we don't know how to handle those responsibilities. So I think schools should do more in order to prepare students ahead of time with those kinds of skills. And I hope that's something that districts might take into consideration after this panel.
Yeah, for me, I guess most of my lens on education is through the lens of equity and social justice, especially for students of color and stuff like that. And so that's that's pretty much what I know about and what I like talking about, and really like, yeah, reimagining school for students whose school wasn't designed for, or for them to succeed and stuff like that. And so, yeah.
And those are very excellent points. I wanted to kind of like trail back to what I had mentioned, which was how I felt that it was hard to approach certain teachers and I found them intimidating, and that certain classmates agreed. I was wondering if you guys have agreed or like felt that way towards your teachers before, and if you guys could elaborate a little bit on that.
It's sort of a personality thing you have to do with a lot of teachers, and it's hard dealing with different 7 different personalities or how many classes that you have. And when teachers aren't really held accountable, they don't have to change their they don't have to change their attitude towards students, or they could do whatever they want. And it really shouldn't be that way, because the truth is, if the students weren't there, they wouldn't have a job. And school wasn't meant for teachers to do whatever they want. School is meant for students to get better and to be able to strive after high school, or to be able to strive as soon as they get into the real world.
Yeah, I go to an art school, and our school has like a really terrible, awful teacher turnover rate. Like, it's just like abysmal. And also a lot of our arts faculty aren't credentialed because they're professional artists who they're mostly hired for their art ability, and they don't go to school to teach, most of them, but they're not required to. But I had one teacher who was talking to us, and she left after this year, but she was talking about she did get credentialed, and she was saying how a lot of the way that teachers were trained, she didn't see it as beneficial for students. And she was saying it's really small things, but they kind of add up to this like culture of school is less about compassion. It's less about passion for students. It's less about like creating the next generation of functional, happy, awesome humans. And it's more about like teaching obedience and teaching like memory stuff. And she said it was really small things, like you're taught like you shouldn't say you love your students, or that you shouldn't like hug them and stuff like that. And I definitely understand how there's a lot of things with like boundaries, and like we don't want to cross certain boundaries between like adults and children especially. But I also think that is reflective of how the culture of education is less about, like, teachers have to go out of their way to show that their students, that they love them. They just go out of their way to be kind, and it's not necessarily like a big part of what they're trained to do or whatever. And I think that's something that should change.
Yeah, I agree with what Ty said. I want to jump off of that as well, that I feel ever since public school has become such a standardized environment with standardized tests and standardized textbooks and, unionized teachers, it's really difficult for the message of what school should be to get across. And I mean, I think that we can all agree that the message should be mainly to inspire students to pursue what makes them happy. And when you have teachers telling students, oh, you're probably not going to even get into your dream school, you shouldn't even try to apply to them, or, oh, that's not a career that's going to make you enough money, or, oh, this career, isn't suitable for you, there are other people who are better at this than you. We're finding that teachers, and I'm not saying that the way that right now teachers are teaching is completely horrible, but teachers are focusing on the wrong aspects of education. They need to start integrating more empathy into their work, and realizing that they're dealing with young adults who are planning their entire lives soon, and taking into account that amount of stress that's being placed on them, and encouraging them to pursue those dreams, pursue those unlikely things, because otherwise, if you never even, hope that they'll become true, there's no way that they will ever come true.
Leslie, going back to your original question about like whether we've personally been impacted by mental health issues. Personally, I haven't, but I've definitely had days where I was feeling down or lacking motivation because of school. And I've also seen the way that my classmates and my peers have dealt with mental health issues with the help of people at school. And it's kind of like how you go to the school nurse and they have you like sit on the side for a few minutes and then they let you go. It's like really on the surface kind of help. And I don't think it's enough to actually like genuinely help students. And I think teachers should be doing more in order to make school feel like a more inviting place. Like students feel excited to go to class. I think Robert mentioned something about it, like students feel like scared to go to school. And I like to use as an example, one of my teachers, my math teacher, even though we're like on Zoom and everything and remote learning, she does a lot of like weekly check-ins with her students where she asks us questions like, can you name something that made you happy this weekend or something? And just knowing that the teacher is there and they want to know like something that made you happy, it makes students feel appreciated and valued. And I think like just that kind of surface stuff, the relationship between a teacher and a student, it can help make students feel more welcome at school. And I'm not saying that it cures mental health issues, but it definitely helps students know that there's someone there for them and someone who cares about them.
And
That was, oh, go for it, Grant.
Thank you. And speaking on the topic of, that's leading to motivation, kids or students actually wanting to go to school, there's not much motivation at home, or a lot of the times when they don't feel like going to school, there's not much support at home. It starts from home, really. If they don't have any support system at home, it would be harder for them to be motivated to want to do anything at school, or want to, just want to achieve better and just be a better person. But you can't do that if you don't really have much support when you go home, or, there's always a problem where it's supposed to be safe.
I agree with you there, Grant. I think we can all agree that mental health should be one of the priorities in a school environment. That being said, I feel like an idea I had was maybe we can make it a requirement for teachers to take some basic classes that have to do with communication skills, body language, coping skills, and etc. And like Sophia has mentioned before, it would make the students' emotions feel valued and just overall heard. And I feel like that's like one of the most important things in a school environment is to be heard, to feel open, to ask your teachers questions, and whatever confusion you have, they're supposed to be like role models. And I think that's very important.
And another thing students could feel better about going to school is teachers could give feedback on when they're doing great. It would motivate them just to do better. And when originally people's minds work how when they get a compliment that they like, it will stay in their mind until they forget it, but it will eventually go into the back of their head and, kind of raise their energy and make them feel more positive about wherever they got that compliment from. And I feel if teachers gave more positive feedback to the students would feel motivated just to do better and achieve greater than what they already have achieved.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add really quickly, and then I'll come back to the more specific talk that we're doing. I feel like it's really easy to write off mental health as something that, isn't important because in the real world, you just have to deal with it on your own. But that's not the case because we have an educational system that's been around for, I don't know, decades, and it hasn't really advanced as quickly as society has. And today we're seeing, students in 6th grade who already have Snapchat, Instagram, all these social media applications. They're constantly comparing themselves to people who they think are better versions of themselves that they need to somehow be. So there's that whole added stress factor, and then there's cyberbullying, and there's so many different, pressures on students today that students 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, or 30 years ago didn't even have to face. So I think it's important for the educational system to catch up on that and recognize that, yes, the times have changed, and now it's important for the educational system to change. And in regards to more specific, ways that we can make school a more welcoming environment, this doesn't specifically, fix the mental health issue, but it does encourage students to believe in their school and feel welcome at their school. I think that leadership programs across the state, they need to be in ASB councils. They need to be representative of, their student body, because if you have a student population that's 40% Latinx and there's no Latinx, students on an ASB council, that's not going to tell that Latinx community that they're capable of being in power. That's going to tell them the complete opposite. And they're also going to lack pride in their school. They're going to lack a feeling of security at their school because people who are unlike them are making decisions for them. So addressing that issue within the ASB system is crucial to move forward.
And yeah, I really love everything that you just said, because I think like so much of it is also on a larger systemic, like big picture level and stuff like that. And yeah, like this is actually very convenient that this is happening right now, because this week in my ethnic studies class, we're learning about the history of education and stuff like that. And it was super interesting. We looked at a bunch of laws from like the early 1800s, like late 1700s and stuff like that, like when kind of some of the first public schools in the US have been created. And it's very clear how the purpose of these places for centuries, from the very beginning of our public education system, have not been about all the things that we were talking about earlier about happiness and passion and all of those things, but it's about training the labor force to become workers and stuff like that. And I think that's really reflected in how we teach, not only how teachers teach their students, but how teachers are taught to teach their students and stuff like that, and just our whole. And so like when we talk about like changing public education, like we also have to adjust society to like around education, and then adjust education to adjust, like it's all super like yeah, like we can fix the small things in individual schools, but we also have to look at the larger cultural thing of why are schools like this, and like why is capitalism, all that stuff. Yeah, but about what you said about representation too, like that's really huge, about how like students of color, like I didn't have a teacher of color until 7th grade maybe, and I still only had like a handful of them at my school. There's only 2 academic teachers of color, and one of them is resigning this year, and so there'll be one. And that's like insane for a faculty of like 40-50 teachers, and it's so normal, like that's so ours is kind of worse. I've seen like charts, ours is like worse than other schools in Oakland and the Bay Area, but it's still very normal for students of color to never have a teacher of color or someone who like reflects their experiences until like later in their life, and that's just so like huge to everything.
I agree that there should be more, more staff of color, because a lot of the times there's so many diversities and nationalities that everybody goes through their own problem, and sometimes it's diverse on a specific nationality. And I feel students and staff of the same color can understand that problem and conquer that problem more than, if you want to say, a teacher of non-color to a student of color.
I kind of wanted to tie back in with Robert's previous idea about how leadership, like allowing students the opportunity to take part in their own leadership, boosts student spirit and morale. I feel like part of the reason why many students might not feel motivated in school is because they aren't really given the chance to take the lead and individualize their experience at school. For example, at my school, I created a leadership program in my grade, a leadership club in my grade, because if we wanted to do leadership activities before that point, all of our money was going to be sent to the senior class. But my class, I was a sophomore at the time, we wanted to raise money just for ourselves. So we created our own little program just for ourselves, just to raise money for our grade. And I think that opportunity that we had to really like decide everything on our own without the input of older students or as much adult involvement, it made us feel like more of a sense of school spirit, like, oh, we're actually doing something to help our school. The only thing that made it a little bit difficult for us was that there were a lot of hoops to jump through to get down that path to actually establish our little club. So I think maybe if schools want to be able to help students individualize their school experience a little bit more, they could make those resources more accessible, like maybe a club, creating a district-sponsored program specifically for allowing students in school to do student-sponsored activities without help from adults. And I think that allowing students to take the lead on those kinds of events really translates into the classroom. It makes them happier because they feel like they're the ones who are actually playing a part in their own school experience outside of the classroom.
And to add on to the topic of leadership, when you get into the real world, leadership is really what gets you where you need to go, because the world's not going to wait for you and ask you what you want to do next, or if you're having any problems. If you're left out, then you're left out. You have to find your own way, unless you know certain people. And knowing certain people in high school, it seems the people or the teachers or the staff that know a various amount of information that can really help the students. It seems like teachers and staff are a lot more vague nowadays, and it seems like it's just holding the students back from being better than who they already are.
Yes, those are really good points. I wanted to kind of go back to what Sophia had mentioned, what her main point was, which was like opening more opportunities with like different classes. It goes back like how we were talking about being independent. I also feel like we do need the support from school by, giving us feedback on like, oh, there's this opportunity to train for this occupation, or there's this art contest here. And so basically bringing new interests into the school environment, also to make students more interested in coming to school and feeling more involved. Sophia, I know this is like your strong suit. I know you're very passionate about this. Do you want to maybe say some things on it?
Sure. So the reason why I had brought up that point about individualizing education like that was because I feel like schools often don't do enough to prepare students for adulthood. And I know you were bringing up the example about allowing students to know about opportunities outside of the classroom, like special programs. But I think schools can also do a little bit more to make sure that that's included in the actual curriculum, or at least it's offered in their electives at school. For example, I was thinking an important life skill could be like financial literacy classes, or maybe like knowing how to do home ec kind of classes like sewing, because those are all valuable skills that are kind of being forgotten and left out of school curriculums. And I'm not saying that it has to be included like as a mandatory class or anything, but I think giving students that option of having it to take could help a lot of students. And that would be like on a personal scale, like if you want to use that skill at home after high school. But even those kinds of classes can maybe help students find a possible career path. Like maybe if a student were to take a class in financial literacy or be exposed to it in some sort of home ec class, they might choose to pursue a career in business or some sort of like business administration. And even if schools don't get the opportunity to add them in class, they might be able to do things like interactive assemblies once a month, where students get an opportunity to do hands-on activities that relate to that kind of thing. For example, just last week, actually, my district hosted a webinar for the first time that I've ever seen it like promoted like that, where they basically gave different webinars about financial literacy, real estate, college and career readiness. And I think that was really useful. As a student, I went and I actually got a lot of useful information. And I think that if something like that were to happen more often and be promoted more to students on a regular basis, it could definitely help out a lot of students.
To go back on what you were talking about on extracurriculars, I also feel there should be a change in those classes, because in my school, I don't know how your guys' school does it, but in my school, you have to reach a certain level or a certain grade, and and you can only get those extracurricular classes, you know, when you pass this class or when you have enough credits, and when, you know, when you move on, when it's a little bit too late, when you're starting to just figure life out, and you know you're starting to be able to be eligible for a job, and you can drive now, you know, and your parents are expecting you to do more things than you usually do, and it's kind of hard doing those extracurricular classes, because it seems the extracurricular classes that they have now, they're just kind of like it seems like they're for just credit makeup, or like, you know, they just give you something to do so you're not walking around school, or you're not just leaving school. And you know, the problem with that is nobody wants to do that. You know, you know if they gave a little bit more effort into extracurriculars, and um you know, gave students the opportunity to have more classes they never would have thought they could do, they'd be more interested at an earlier age than later, as if, you know, what they're already used to, because there's a lot of students nowadays that aren't comfortable with getting out of their comfort zone. And if you do that earlier and give them, you know, give them life classes earlier, they could be more comfortable with getting out of their comfort zone when it comes to them going into the real world, and when they have to do everything on their own.
Mhm.
So with the extracurricular classes, um, there a lot of schools don't really have the money, because nowadays it's like it's so limited, because, you know, just because the schools don't have money. And Robert, I know you had some sort of example. I think it was a rich school versus a poor school. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, you said it perfectly in the simplest terms possible. So I'm lucky enough to grow up in a community where there's only one high school in my town. So people of all economic backgrounds, they eventually attend the same high school unless they choose to go to a different city. Um, but like one city below me, Santa Rosa, there's such big disparities between each of their campuses, each of their high school campuses, and the two that I have in mind, one's in the southwest corner of Santa Rosa, the other one's in the northeast corner. The one in the southwest, I'm gonna mess up my directions. The one in the southwest is primarily Latinx, Hispanic, and their funding is very low compared to the other one that's in the Northeast, which has a lower percentage of people of color, students of color attending. So what you see happen is the students who go to the more lower economic school, those students, they're going to go to that school and they're going to be like, okay, this is what I deserve in life. I deserve messy bathrooms. I deserve, teachers that are really only there because of that paycheck that they get, that they see themselves in the way that the school treats them. And if the way that the school treats them is because of a lack of funding, that's going to play a role. It may not play the primary role in the student's success, but it's going to play a huge part in the student's success. If you compare it in terms of the amount of AP classes offered, there's certainly way more AP classes offered at the richer school versus the poorer school, to put it in simplest terms. And that directly translates to, our students going to be able to take classes that are going to lower their college tuition? Are they going to be able to have, the access to that good of an education that is usually offered by AP courses? So finding ways. Oh, the other big thing is that the way that these schools get most of their funding is by the area around them. So if the area around them, like in Southwest Santa Rosa, if it's, if it's impoverished, then that school is going to get less money. So, and obviously the one that's in the Northeast, it's in a higher economic neighborhood, they're going to get more funding. So readdressing how we're funding our schools is so important, especially considering that, schools, I feel like ever since like the major cases, and I mean, they were historically segregated in the South, and then Brown v. Board of Education, and their schools are not just a place of education anymore. I feel they're a place that we need to continue, that we're either ensuring equality or moving towards equity. and education. And I feel like that's the next step. We've kind of achieved equality. That's debatable, but we need to start pushing for equity because we're still de facto segregated. And yeah, I'm probably going to come up with other stuff, but I'll lend the floor for a second.
And also with school funding, it seems like the original method, there needs to be more methods, but it seems like the original method was fundraising and trying to get, unmotivated kids to do things for the school when the school it wasn't even doing enough for them in the first place. And there would be definitely needs to be more methods for the school funding to add to their money so we can help students achieve greater, faster, and a better process. And so students don't have to have this on and off process. And so if they have more classes and more funding, students can figure out their path earlier than going to college, and then they're like, oh, I don't even want to do this class anymore. I thought I wanted to do this major, but now I see that it's really not for me. And then they just, they wasted how much ever money they wasted, about maybe $1,000 in tuition, or however college payments go. It's a lot of money. And college is definitely more of a business than the school. So college does cost a lot of money. And also before we move on to any topic, I want to say this before I forget. I feel like not just the teachers need to be held accountable, but the quote unquote higher positions, the school boards needs to be held accountable. And I feel that as if to get that job, they would need more teacher experience, because I know a lot of really good teachers that would have some crazy good ideas to, make the students more motivated. And I know a lot of teachers that know what the students want. I know a lot of teachers that know what the students need. And it seems like we have a lot of the school board or have these type of personalities where they don't know how their idea really affects everybody. They just kind of push the idea out, do it, and be like, I'm the higher position, so you have to listen to me. Just because you've been teaching for about 5 to 10 years doesn't mean you have more of opinion than I have. And so I just wanted to say that.
Can I add to that? I think I'm very passionate about this topic, Grant. Thank you for bringing it up. Yes, accountability is a huge issue. I feel like students and teachers and the higher ups should be kind of equal. And I know that sounds strange because like, oh yeah, the higher ups equal, but I think that the space of like respect is very important. And if there's not respect in a classroom environment, how are we going to learn to trust? And the learning process is just going to be a harder process. Like you said the other day, Grant, your example was like awesome. You were like, when sometimes there's your teacher and they're like, the classroom's like doing the usual, and there'll be like a viewer, I'm not sure what the exact term is, but a principal or someone walks in of a higher up, and the teacher will like get all like perky and like, start doing stuff. And I just think that's like a great point, Grant. And I just wanted to add to that.
I can elaborate on that point just so everybody's on topic. So what I was saying is the teachers was acting the way that they usually act, just do your homework, whatever, don't talk to me, shut up, so I can sit down and do whatever I want, until the principal comes in unexpectedly, and all of a sudden they're all perfect and everything, be like, okay, class, let's do this and that. And they were the ones sitting down on their phone doing whatever they wanted. And I know a lot of the times, even sometimes teachers know that a principal is gonna come in, or somebody else from a different state or school board or a special guest is going to come in. So they gotta prep their class and tell every one of their students that they need to act perfect and everything. It was just a really funny example to share. It was a great example, and it was just really funny.
I definitely agree with you too about that issue of accountability. Like, there's a big difference between how teachers will act before and after they see someone who's like higher up come in. I just wanted, before I forget, I wanted to go back to Robert's point about equity between schools and how certain schools definitely receive a lot more resources than other ones. I think we could even take that to like a physical level. Like, certain schools are just physically a lot nicer than other ones. And I want to use this example. I once had the opportunity to take a field trip to several different high schools in one day, all within the same little section of the district. And you could see a huge difference between one school and the other. Like, one school was, it was like a little city. They had all this landscaping and everything. And then the other school, like the buildings were all dilapidated and stuff. And I think as students, that can be kind of distracting because you're not really in a comfortable environment. So I definitely think that districts should do more to make sure that all schools within their jurisdiction are have equitable maintenance, so that all students can have a comfortable learning environment. And I think Ty wanted to mention something on the issue of accountability, so I'll let you talk.
Yeah, no, this is a super quick comment, but I was saying, but yeah, yeah, because Grant's story kind of shows how like some teachers, based on like the system, whatever, aren't there's less of a pressure to be accountable to students. Like, there's a pressure to be accountable to higher ups who might like, I don't know how it works, but your job is on the line or whatever if you don't behave a certain way or whatever, if the students aren't behaving a certain way. But there's less of a like, I've had some teachers who, yes, feel very personally accountable to their students. They feel very much like, if I mess up, then students, I want you to tell me that. But like, it's not necessarily the norm, or it's not necessarily expected of them, and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I like what Leslie was saying about how like students and administrators and teachers, like there should be some sort of level of respect and equality, even if that doesn't mean that like we can make all the same decisions or whatever, but that there's yeah, there's balance there, where, because for the most part, like students have no control over how they're educated, and that makes no sense because we're the people being educated, even though it does make like a lot of sense for like racism or whatever. But like, yeah, that's a huge thing, is that students, like, number one, we don't know how we want to be educated necessarily, because we're just taught to be machines, or we're just taught to memorize stuff and spit it back out. So we aren't even empowered to like ask questions of our own system, ask questions of our teachers, demand things of our schools or whatever. That's not a thing that students are regularly empowered to do. But if we knew more about the history of education, if we knew more about like how to, like people power and how to kind of mobilize ourselves as students, like there should just be more accountability, like to the students themselves and like to serve students.
And to go back on, the higher positions versus the lower positions, which is the teachers versus the school board, I think it would be a great idea if there was some sort of respect level or some sort of peace where where teachers and school boards can agree more. And because teachers have more experience with students than the school board, because when the school board works, they're usually just around grown-ups that aren't going to school. They're around all their co-workers that are trying to create all these ideas without actually having experience with younger students and experience with working with youth.
Yeah, and I wanted to add on, and then I remembered something from our conversation on school funding earlier. I feel like a lot of times students are written off as just incapable beings, and that's really damaging to the way that students interact with their school environments. Because I mean, yes, I'm going to admit that there are some students who really don't want to be at school, and they really could care less on how their school runs. But there are a majority of students who do care how their school runs, and there are a majority of students who want a good education from their school. So it's really saddening to me to see adults generalize that our students, they can't vote because their brains aren't fully developed. They can't make the decisions because they don't know how economics works. They can't make the decisions because they don't know how our school financing system works. What we're seeing here is students have ideas, and when they're not listened to, they're gonna feel, silence. They're gonna feel like, they have no place in their school. So going back to what I was talking about with school financing, we all agree that school is a place for education, hopefully for a future career or future university or college. So that basic principle extends to setting up a person for their whole lives. And I think that what we see here is that certain students who go into school, like first grade, they come from, let's say, a lower economic background, they go to a public school, and the best way that the school can assist them is to prepare them to succeed in their life, however it is that they want to do that. But I think what we're seeing, that's the problem here, is that if that student comes from a low economic background and then they go to a school that's gonna not prepare them sufficiently so that when they leave school, they're still in that low economic background, they're never gonna break out of that cycle of poverty. They're gonna stay within it. And that's what the system is doing right now. It's keeping students where they are. It's not propelling them up. Let's say another person starts in first grade, but their family makes a combined income of $250,000 a year. They don't want to go to a public university. They're going to go to a public school. They're going to go to a private school. And that's going to allow them to stay either at that, when they're, I don't know, 30, they'll probably also make like 120,000 a year or something, because they got that private education because they already had that money to begin with. So we have this problem in school funding where it literally keeps people in the economic status that they were in, unless they work really hard, they pull all-nighters, and they basically kill themselves by the end, overwhelm themselves, sorry, by the end of their high school career. And that's not, I love, pushing myself super hard, but it's not a sustainable way of, educating yourself for a lot of other students. I just wanted to add that context.
Yeah, and this is back, Robert, to what you were saying about like just kind of the underestimating of like what students can understand and stuff like that. This is very, again, convenient that this is happening right now, because my school is going through some really like turbulent political times right now, in terms of equity and in terms of like transparency from our school board. I go to a charter school, and so that sucks in a lot of ways, because the school board is one of those school boards where they're not accountable to the public at all. And basically, yeah, our teacher retention problem is like awful. We pay our teachers little to nothing, and they leave after a year or two, like at most. And there's a revolving door of teachers of color. I've never had a teacher of color be at the school for more than like 2 or 3 years. So it's really just like very bad. And this has been an issue since before I even went there, and I'm in my 6th year, and we've been talking about it since before I went there, since I was 11 years old. And the school has done very little. They're convinced that they've done a lot, but they really have not. And we have been like, this is the first year that we're really like pushing. We're like, y'all, this is reaching like a crisis point. Like we have to like really change this now, or like it'll never. And when students would come individually to the board and would say, or would come to individually to people in power, the attitude is very much like, well, you don't know how union contracts work. You don't know how like negotiations work. You don't know how salaries work. You don't know how da 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 da. And that was like supposed to deter us, as if the point then is not like teach us how that stuff works, and then do better and stuff like that. And like if you are, if the point is that we don't understand it because we're too young, because we're whatever, you literally work at a school, like literally explain it to us. And then so basically I'm one of the co-chairs of our board of students of color. We met with the teachers union, and we got all this information, and we got all the data about the salaries. We got all the data about the stuff. Sorry, this is like a story, but we got all this information, and we did a presentation to all the students And the school was very mad about that because now we were doing their job. We taught the students how the salaries work. And so now then we have all the students are now like, okay, I get it now. I get that the teachers asked for a 21% adjustment in inflation and they got a 3% like stipend, and that's hardly $5 per paycheck. And like, okay, we have to like da 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 da. And so we were able to organize like a movement of students to come to these board meetings and like yell at these people. And it's really like the power of like, yeah, just it was very much for me, it was a lesson in like how do you empower students to like take control, and very much like knowledge being power, and like and the power of many people when it was just individual students, when it was just me and like a few of my friends in our board coming and saying like, we want this to change. They were like, whatever, you're 5 kids, you can't do anything. And then we got 100 kids. And that's like, yeah, so just like, what was my point? I don't remember my point, but yeah, like teaching students, giving them the knowledge to take control of their own education is like so powerful and necessary.
I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Ty, I love how you were so passionate because you are going through that right now, and it's very real, a very real struggle. The whole time you were telling that story, I was like, they should educate us. They should educate us on these situations. I forgot who had mentioned it before, but I think it was Robert saying that they don't let us participate, or he said it differently in a better way, but you said they don't let us participate because our brains are not fully developed. And yes, that might be the case, but that doesn't mean that our opinions or our views are any less. And I feel like honestly what we have been saying is that's like the main issue is we feel like we aren't being seen, as well as there's a lot of inequality. And it's just, honestly, I really want to go back to inequality because that's like a very, very real situation. And I see it with even my location. It's insane. It's insane how it's the difference, all because of like the lower class or your location of your schooling. It's insane. I don't know what else to say.
On the topic of equality, I feel you guys on that because going off of each and every one of your examples, that's really brutal, especially yours, Ty. That was really brutal how a teacher that's been through school in some of the hardest ways that they could have possibly been gone through school is talking down to another student, or just talking down to a younger person who quote unquote doesn't know better. And I really feel for you on that topic. And also, that just goes back on, teachers' personalities. If they're not held accountable, or there's not some kind of pressure on them besides, not getting a paycheck or not losing their job, there's they don't have to change their attitude towards anything. And Leslie, I think you mentioned this. I think it was you, but you were talking about cameras being in the classroom to monitor the teachers. And would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes, I had mentioned that in one of our previous meetings. I wanted the opinion of my fellow panelists, what their thoughts were on, putting cameras in the classroom, because we were also on the topic of accountability. And I know Robert had mentioned the financial aspect of that, and I understand that. Although I feel like it would really make a difference, because going back to the example of like how teachers change when they're being watched, if there was a camera that was there, even if it wasn't to specifically watch teachers, but just overall to see how your teachers and the students interact with each other, because it's not just the teachers, it's also the students. I don't want to sit here and say, oh, it's the teachers, because, you know, there is some students that I think, like Robert said, that don't really want to be there. But I thought it was a great idea to have cameras installed, although I don't know what everyone else thinks, but it was just an idea that popped into my head. Thank you for bringing it up, Grant. It slipped my mind.
No problem. And to elaborate on that a little bit, I know there would be a lot sort of, you know, there would be most likely a lot of legal documents everybody would have to agree on. And there would be a lot of laws changing, or a lot of, you know, a lot of development within, you know, legal rights. But I feel like if there was some, you know, some sort of technology where there's a monitor in the classroom, you know, not just a higher up, but if there's some sort of monitoring in the classroom when, you know, a teacher goes off on a student, you know, and the student fires back because the teacher started it first, and then the student gets sent up to the office, they're gonna believe the teacher because they've been working with that teacher for, you know, some years now. And so whatever the student says is gonna go out the window. And whatever the teacher says is just going to be all over the table, and they're only going to listen to the really.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can I add to that? This is such a passionate one for me, because, like I have stated before, I feel so unheard for the 12 years. I'm about to graduate, but for my 12 years of education, there has been many times where I have spoken my truth and what I've been dealing with, or just like anything along those lines, to, you know, the teacher or to like a principal, and they don't take into consideration what I'm saying up until I bring a guardian along, and they say the same words that I have said, but it's like back to the teachers, like, or the principals acting differently. For me, they would just, it seemed like it was a wall. I was talking to a wall. And as for my mom, they were like sitting there, eye contact, nodding, you know, giving feedback. And it's such a I'm just lost in words, and I'm very passionate about that one, but I just wanted to add that.
I see where you're coming from. I'm sorry. I was just gonna get this out real quick and I'll let you talk. I'm sorry. I see where you're coming from, Leslie. You're saying there's more of a backfire on the students until somebody who, you know, has their brain developed comes in and, and then, you know, and then they start acting right. You know, they get some act right inside of them. That's all I wanted to say. Sorry, you could go ahead and speak.
Yeah, no, I think, okay, for me, it's kind of like, I get it. And I also am like, I think there could be some with things. Okay, but because I completely understand the like want for accountability and the want for kind of like evidence and like proof when something happens to us, when like an injustice occurs. Like I know, like for at our school, we've had a lot of issues with teachers and like racial microaggressions, and like y'all probably experience like similar things. Like teachers say effed up stuff like a lot of the time, and it creates a really like awful. And there have been so many times where like students will go to the school and say things like, this teacher said this like awful thing or is treating me in this way, and the school, yeah, just like you just said, like doesn't necessarily take the student's word seriously. The teacher can just say that didn't happen, and then that's like, okay, like that didn't happen. Other things with like sexual assault or like sexual harassment, like by a teacher, if there's like, so I get like our desire to have like proof, like, okay, there's a camera in this classroom, so I know like on Thursday afternoon when this thing happened to me, there's a record of that and I can use that. But I think like that gets into the area of basically like policing in our schools, and yeah, I think what if these were coming from, okay, this is like whatever, but like when we have the state essentially surveil its people and kind of like control how we're supposed to like behave and stuff like that, I just don't think that it would be used in a just way. I don't trust that that if there was a camera in a classroom, that the like I don't know that in low-income schools, especially, or for Black and Brown students, that the state couldn't somehow use that to justify like the treatment of or like to further oppress students or teachers of color or something like that. Like I'm guessing like if teachers do something like, okay, sorry, I'm not explaining, this is not a linear thought process. Sorry, I know we're running out of time, but like if the goal is to basically create accountability between teachers and students and say we want to act in a respectful and in a just relationship and stuff like that, then I think that like putting a camera in the classroom would put like pressure on both parties, but it's not necessarily justice, or it doesn't necessarily like address the root of the problem. Like the root of the problem is that teachers are acting out. The root of the problem is that there's power imbalances and that teachers aren't taught to respect their students, or like whatever these other issues are, and it goes into ableism, racism, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all that. Like those are kind of the issues that create the problem that we're trying to address. And like putting a camera in a classroom, yes, now we have proof that these things are happening, but it doesn't actually stop those things from happening, or it doesn't actually like get to the root cause of those issues. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's kind of like the whole like, yeah, Robert, I've seen you trying to say something for a bit, so I don't know if you want to.
No, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think it would cause more harm than good. But for the viewers, I want them to realize that we're willing to even consider putting cameras in the classroom so that we have a voice. We need a technological device in classrooms so that we have a voice. So like Ty said, there are root problems with it. And I think it stems from the fact that students are considered, you know, incapable of thinking, incapable of formulating honest opinions, honest evidence from their own minds. I don't want to just speak to speak, so I'm going to mute myself now, but I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Thank you, fellow panelists. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Does anyone have any final thoughts to share?
Sophia, you had mentioned in past meetings, your idea for you know, different types of classes. I don't know if you ever were able to expand on that. I want you to do that if you can, if you want to.
All right, thank you. Actually, I was thinking about it when Grant was discussing the topic of helping students find a possible career path before going into college, and I just forgot to bring it up, but thank you for reminding me. So we're talking about the issue of individualizing education and how a lot of students are really limited to the classes that their school offers. And like, for example, for my school, it's a pretty small school, so we don't really have that many electives we can take. But I think one way that districts or schools might be able to address that kind of issue would be offering a so-called like blank period, where basically there's not a certain course associated with that class period, but instead students have the option to pick from several different online classes to take during that time. I mean, we just spent a whole year doing remote learning, so we know that students can do online classes. And I think if classes were online like that, like if schools partnered up with some sort of online organization that hosts online classes, for example, there are a lot of online schools that have a really wide variety of classes, like different languages or like different skills, like we had been talking about, like financial literacy or even law classes. I think if students had the option to pick between those instead of just taking what they're limited to by their school's electives, it would not only allow them to individualize their school experience for themselves more, but it would also give them the chance to see what else is out there besides what's offered at their school.
And also I think also in the some last meetings you mentioned some non-restrictions, and the non-restriction would be you can come from anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter what school you go to. It doesn't matter what classes you used to have. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what grade average you have. It should be. It would be to where there is some sort of agreement with all the students, you know, just everybody in general, to be able to access that website, so students can learn more and they can progress faster and they can figure out what they really want to do in life. And it would just make it easier on everybody.
Yeah, and I think focusing those opportunities on schools that lack the opportunities, although it's not, I don't think it's a permanent fix to educational inequality. It's definitely probably the most feasible right now, unless the state is willing to, reabsorb all the income taxes from the local boards and then redistribute them so they're equal and then plead with the federal government for more funds. But that's a difficult thing to do. So I think focusing Sophia's idea on those schools that lack those opportunities is an excellent way to advance equity in education.
Does anybody have anything else to get off their chest? Because I know we have about 4 to 5 minutes maybe before we start the Q&A.
I don't really have any like new thoughts or suggestions, but I just kind of wanted to be like add to the fact that we should have more classes that revolve around adulthood, because I'm going to be completely honest. I'm very confused on taxes, and I think that that's something that I should know about before, getting out of high school. And I don't really know who to talk to about that. Also, like there's some people who don't know the severity of credit cards, and I think that's also very important to be educated on, as well as like basic adult skills. But I just wanted to add that again, just to put a spotlight, because I think that's very important. That's all I have to say.
That reminds me, I think we've already touched on this, but just to get a little more specific. So first generation students, like I'd mentioned earlier, that cycle of poverty, first generation students, they don't have any idea of how, American credit card systems work, how investing in the stock market works, how retirement accounts works, all the different, economic resources that people who have been living here for decades know exists. And I think, again, recognizing the educational system as a tool to improve the lives or the eventual careers or lives of students, regardless of their ethnicity, race, etc., is important. And I think, again, offering those classes like financial literacy could really resolve that issue. I know, I think we had mentioned in past meetings that our students even going to want to, but it means a lot if they're offered. And I'm sure eventually, students, they'll want to. They'll want to know how to make money. Yeah.
And just to leave a message to the audience before we get off onto the Q&As, I just want to say, please really look into the whole conversation, and please really try to inform as much as you can, because we really want our school to be not just our schools in general, but we want every school to be better. And we're already trying to focus on equality, diversity, and we just want less people to struggle after high school, and we want more people. We'd rather have people struggle earlier than when they get out of high school and go to college and they're more independent and now they're struggling on their own. They don't really know what to do, and they don't really know where to go.
Very, very nicely put, Grant. Very nicely put.
Are you guys ready for some questions from the audience?
Yes, please.
Great.
Definitely.
And I am going to open the Q&A. I don't know if anyone has put anything in there yet. Nope, they have not. So at this point, we just wanted to open the door for some dialogue with the students, with those of you who have stuck with us. And we know we can't engage our YouTube audience in the Q&A, but hopefully some of the educators on the line will be able to pose some questions to the students to get further clarification or get their thoughts and ideas and insights on some of the stuff touched on today. So at that point, I'm going to go ahead and invite you to drop a question in the Q&A and or a comment that we can share with the student panelists. And if you're more comfortable with using the chat feature, that is also okay. So just opening up the floor. Do any of our audience members here have any specific questions for our panel? And actually, I believe you might be able to unmute yourselves because it appears, or you can request to be unmuted if you wanted to speak. Jamie, I see your thing lit up, so I'm gonna see if this works. I'm not sure if that did.
I did not have a question. I'm fine. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Any of our facilitators have any questions for the students today? You guys covered stuff so
I have a
well.
question. This is Tanette. Can you hear me? You guys did a fabulous job, by the way. And so you talked about so many things that, and you were comfortable in your conversation and bringing up some very, very tough issues that education is aware of. However, the solutions, I'm not sure where the solutions are. So one of the things is the funding, right? You guys surprised me because you went there in that conversation about funding and making it equitable. My question to you is, although you may not know all of the how the process works, describe your ideal equitable funding towards schools. I think it was Sophia said that she had the opportunity to visit a bunch of schools in the same vicinity. And really what I got out of that, Sophia, was this physical space that you're talking about for funding. It was so beautiful, as whereas other schools weren't. So what would be your ideal way of funding an equitable funding recommendation that each of you guys would have, let's say to your institution?
Okay, well, I guess I can start us off. So kind of to elaborate on that example that I had given before. So one school that I went to, it was a newer school. It was like closer to the headquarters for my district, LAUSD. And it was one of their newer schools. I believe it was like under 10 years old. And they had like the entire campus. It was a huge campus. And they had like trees and everything was like new pavement, and they had like perfectly functioning ACs and chairs. And then one of the other schools that I went to, it was actually an older school, like more established. So you'd have thought that it would be the other way around. But that school actually had a lot less access to newer resources, and like the buildings were a little bit more like run down and dilapidated, and it wasn't like super sanitary. So I feel like, I know that not all schools are as big as that really nice school, and not all schools have the space in order to make it that nice. But I feel like schools should at least, like the district should at least make the effort to make sure that funding is there to make like the higher standards for sanitation and maintenance, so that it's a comfortable learning environment for students. For my school in particular, I'm kind of like in the middle ground there. It's like not super run down and not super brand new. But we still do have some issues. Like, for example, we used to have like paint chipping off the stairs in the high school building, and sometimes students would slip. Like, it wasn't bad falls, but like, oops, you almost fell. And then other times there were like issues with plumbing, where the bathroom had to be closed for maybe a couple hours in the day. So I just feel like districts should do more to make sure that there's more maintenance checkups and sanitation checkups, just to make sure that students don't have to deal with those kind of issues during the school day. Like, you don't have to worry about not having a bathroom available to you, so that the school environment can be more comfortable for students, because those kinds of things can be really distracting. Like, you have to use the bathroom, but the bathroom's closed. So I feel like if schools if districts did more to actually like regulate and monitor those kinds of things, it could be helpful to students across the district.
Yeah, yeah. Oh wait, Renee, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, I was hoping to ask a question. I just think about everything shifting in the past year, like in education, and the shift with the pandemic to the virtual space, and then some people are going back and some people are staying virtual. I'm wondering if you've experienced just anything awesome that teachers did in the virtual space that you hope they will continue when education goes back to a face-to-face. So like anything different or cool that happened virtually that you're hoping will like stay part of what teachers do in education. I'm just wondering if anybody experienced anything like that.
Oh, Grant, did you want to say something?
Yes. In my previous year and junior year, there was a credit recovery because something happened to where somehow my history credits were missing, and so there was an online program before we even got to the pandemic, and it was controlled. I think it was controlled by my teacher, and I was able to do my work very, like, all the hours of the work time were flexible, and all the assignments in the work time were very flexible, just flexible hours that were able to work for me, because I'm a fast-paced worker. If I don't do it now, I don't like it to be in the back of my head. I don't really like to procrastinate, and so I was able to adjust to the timing of the assignments, and I was able to do the assignments way before they were due, which is, just personally, that's just me. I like to get it done before it's actually due. And so I feel online schools now, they don't really watch out for that. And also I know, because personally, my mom is a teacher, and she knows a little bit online, virtual versus remote. And for my school, remote is the students who want to go back to school, and virtual is the students who don't want to go back to school. And it seems virtual has a lot more and harder work than it needs to be, because whoever is in charge of that program, they're just pushing out work without even recognizing that it's harder for the students. So one thing I would say to wrap my answer up is flexible hours within the work assignments online, and then also recognition, like before they send out that assignment, they would know that, like, they can complete it, and it wouldn't be super hard, because it's hard to anymore, because it's dangerous for me. And unfortunately, I have a heart condition. That's why it's dangerous for me to go. But I'm sorry, it says my internet connection is unstable. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes,
You're
Grant,
okay,
we can still
Grant.
hear you.
Okay. But to continue on, it was some teachers, they switched over their methods, and I had no idea, because I wasn't in class for that. And so it kind of made me anxious, and it made me anxious and feel like all of a sudden I was going to fail my classes because I didn't get this certain information from my teachers. And at that point everybody was trying to figure out how switching from being online and at home and being forced to stay home, from there to coming back to school. And now teachers can either choose to give you written work, or they could still give you work online. It was hard to adjust.
Mhm. Um, Great mindfulness, Grant. I wanted to answer your question also, Renee. Personally, for me, something that's positive about my virtual learning, I noticed that a lot more teachers are taking into consideration like your emotions, and that's what I've been talking about. But I love that because they've been putting up like Google Docs, like that you could fill out, like how are you feeling about the week, or how are you doing with virtual learning. And I feel like that's really awesome, because it goes back to what we were discussing, which is our voice being heard. Yes. And yeah, or like we'll go into the classroom and it's not like as I guess I would say rushed. For my personal experience, it's more like, they allow like 5 to 10 minutes for students to arrive. In my experience, it's been more flexible. And so in those 5 to 10 minutes, the teachers are like, oh, like how's all my students doing? Well, some teachers, let me just say that. Some teachers are like that. And they're like, oh, how's my students doing? And really check in on us. And it seems like they actually care, because I think it's because everyone during this pandemic and during this isolation period has felt lonely, or some type of emotion that wasn't necessarily the best. And yeah, so I would say my best experience with virtual learning is the empatheticness towards the students and the emotions. Great question, Renee. Thank you so much.
Ty, I think you wanted to say something to the last question, or was it my imagination?
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, it was a funding question. Yeah, I was just thinking, well, because I guess like to think about like ideal like funding, it also means like, yeah, solving all of the systemic society problems. Also like I feel like funding schools is a big thing, but we can't also just hand schools a check and that will like fix the problems. Like it's like it's such a larger thing than that. So like, yeah, I mean, definitely I feel like right now makes literally no sense that like schools that are doing well and schools that are in wealthier neighborhoods get more funding. Like that's literally just like, who came up with that? That's dumb. So I feel like, yeah, equity would mean like giving more resources to schools that are quote unquote failing, or schools in low income neighborhoods, or like whatever. And yeah, and doing that. And also I feel like stipends for like teachers who do like extra work for, I don't know, at my school specifically, like basically all of our teachers of color, because there's so few of them, do like they have to do the equity work at their schools and stuff like that. So stuff like that, I don't know, stipends for those teachers. But also like, then it's like, well, if we just want to like give money to places, to schools where in low income neighborhoods, like why do we want to keep low income neighborhoods, or why would we like accept racial disparities and wealth disparities and stuff like that? And like, let's address those too and stuff like that. And like, let's, then we get into like reparations and like all those other things that are like also, I think, just as relevant to the conversation of school funding, because it's all just so like linked and stuff like that. Yeah.
I wanted to add on that really quick. I think Ty, you said it perfectly. I think, yes, I guess technically just handing each school an extra amount of money yearly isn't just going to solve the issue, but it is the right step towards solving the issue. Because once you have that money, then you start thinking about, okay, well, how do we make sure this actually is spent effectively? How do we involve students to the right degree? How do we involve teachers to the right degree? How do we negotiate with unions? How do we, et cetera? But it's all about that equality of opportunity, making sure that we get rid of those racial disparities or wealth disparities, and then seeing how each unique community, that's where the boards would have more power to address the needs of the individual community. Maybe like I live in Sonoma County, we have wildfires, so maybe that money can somehow help to teach on how to save water, how to be like, I don't know, it's things that are specific towards each community to make sure that that money is being spent effectively. So yeah.
Thank you guys for answering that, for your responses, and they're great responses. That's what I wanted to hear. Basically it's a very complex, one of those complex issues. So I really appreciate your insight, Sophia, Ty, and Robert, and Leslie, and Grant, in terms of funding. But you also brought up something, all of you, I don't know if the attendees heard this, is the vital importance of the human being that you are, of needing that empathy, right? And that caring aspect that it seems like all of you have experienced that in the virtual space. My last question is how do you hope that will be carried over and back into the classroom?
Definitely, like earlier, I think I went into the example of my math teacher, how she would do like weekly check-ins with her students. Like I gave the example one time, she asked us to all privately message her one thing that made us smile over the weekend. Another time she gave us like a set of 10 pictures of little goats and she was like, which one reflects your mood right now? And that kind of thing just kind of like makes students feel happy to be in class. Like personally, math isn't exactly my favorite subject, but I enjoy going to that class simply because I know I'm gonna get to interact with that teacher. And I think going even in person, knowing that the teacher cares about you and does those daily check-ins with you, it makes students feel valued and appreciated. Like, you know, that teacher cares about how you're doing and you can trust them to like ask them questions and that kind of thing.
I think Sophia said it well. I'm just going to say yes.
Thank you all so much. I think we are at our time now. So I just wanted to honor the audience's time and honor the panel's time here and express my sincere appreciation. I learned so much from you all. I was texting some of my co-facilitators here, just thinking about some of the things that you said, just in how you perceive the structure that we all exist in as professionals in that structure, and how fascinating that is in a hierarchical sense. Like the way you perceive the hierarchy of education in itself was just a really eye-opening moment for me. Like, so I just wanted to, I saw it in the chat. Somebody said it perfectly. Just the fact that you were honest and raw with your opinions and you have your unique experiences and you shared those openly. And even though some of those things are hard to hear, it's truth. It's your truth. And so I just wanted to acknowledge and thank you all for spending your time with us today and encourage you to share this widely. It's recorded, right? Share this with your teachers, share this with your families for sure. And we will be doing the same. And I wish you all a great afternoon. Is there any closing thoughts, Tony, that you wanted to share with the audience before we sign off?
Oh, thank you for that. My closing thoughts is ditto what you just said. And I actually was texting a colleague and saying how refreshing and calm you are in presenting and having a raw and transparent conversation, that I wrote down, this is something we need to learn, to have this conversation, because that's the only way that you can get to the root, to have solutions that are sustainable for the future, that allows for that equity and equality. So thank you for opening our eyes. At the beginning, I said to you, you are the future, the present and the future, and you definitely have empowered me to keep doing the work that I'm doing and everyone else on this call. Thank you, you guys. Look forward to some future work.
Can I just say thank you for the opportunity and just you guys being open to hearing our thoughts and opinions. That makes all the difference, and it's a start. So thank you to all of you as well.
I also wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. I never thought I would be able to achieve I never thought I'd be capable of doing something like this, especially after, the years of going through, all I can do is complain, but I couldn't really put it into specific words and talk to the right people who actually care. And I just want to say thank you for being here and caring and, being open-eared instead of, trying to put us down for our words and being here to help.
Yes.
Wow. I feel like crying, but good cry. Thank you. Wow. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
You as
You as
well.
well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You